Frost across the south through Saturday evening, and still some snow showers mixed in over the hills of northern England. But here comes the big change on Sunday, wet weather sweeping in. Now eventually it'll turn milder, but as it hits the colder air, some snow for the hills of Wales, then for parts of the Midlands, northern England and up into Scotland. Could be a few hours of heavy snow before it all turns to rain later on, and it starts to turn windy. Now, as that wet weather arrives, it'll still be cold, but by the end of the day, milder air coming into the southwest means temperatures in double figures.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's just gone 6. I'm Michelle Dewberry. This is Dewbs and Co, the show where we'll get into some of the things that have got you talking today. Now, Sajid Javid says that the model of the NHS, as it was when it was set up 70 years ago, is not sustainable for the future. Is he wrong? Do you reckon it needs a big whole root and branch reform? If so, what do you think that should look like? And a leading economic think tank says it's time to tax pensions more. Oh, God blimey, if you're a pensioner or about to become one, I can almost hear you groaning in your sofa right now. What do you make of it? For example, if your spouse dies and you inherit their pension, they suggest that should now be subject to inheritance tax. Should it be? I want your thoughts on that. And of course, we've all heard, haven't we, about that awful story, the tragic deaths of those little boys who fell through the lake in Solihull Solihull. It's got a lot of people talking, of course, and some suggestions now that perhaps public safety ads, remember those that we used to see when we were children? Is it time to bring those back to help warn children of the dangers that are out there? And have you seen the latest in the Buckingham Palace race row? Well, now there's been a statement from Buckingham Palace. Apparently the two parties have met, there's been an apology which has been accepted, and so we move on. Do we? Is that the end of it? I want your thoughts on that. We'll have it all to come, but first up, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Michelle, thank you. I'm Bethany Elsey here to bring you up to date from the GB newsroom. Eurostar says it's been forced to cancel its services to London on Boxing Day because the RMT strikes will close the UK's high-speed line. The announcement comes as more than 40,000 union members strike for a third time this week, following an ongoing dispute over pay and conditions. RMT leader Mick Lynch says little progress has been made during negotiations, but that he believes a compromise is still achievable. More industrial action is planned for tomorrow. The family of a woman who was murdered by a partner has described her killer as the definition of a monster. Ross McCullum has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 23 years for murdering Megan Newborough at his parents' home in Colville in Leicestershire. He'd been dating the 23-year-old, who was also his work colleague, for less than a month when he killed her in August last year. Outside the court, her brother John said his family is struggling to come to terms with what's happened.
I know how difficult it's been for my parents and sister to sit at court every day, listening to the web of lies spun by someone Megan not only knew, but whom she trusted, someone who clearly had no love for her at all. We're the ones now serving a life sentence. No amount of time in prison can bring Megan back. We have to carry on with our lives as best as we can, but Megan will never leave our thoughts.
The victims of suspected triple murder in Northamptonshire have been named by police as Anju Asok and her two young children, Jiva and Janvi Saju. They were found with serious injuries at an address in Kettering yesterday morning. Police have confirmed the mother was an NHS nurse. A 52-year-old man is being questioned in connection with their deaths. 3 people are in a critical condition and 1 person has been arrested after a suspected crowd crush at a music venue in South London.
I've asked us to close the show. We apologize to you. This is nothing to do with us.
Police were called to the Brixton O2 Academy last night following reports a large number of people were trying to force their way into a concert. The Met Police has launched an investigation and is reviewing social media and CCTV footage. Commander Colin Wingrove from Lambeth Police spoke at the scene.
In relation to some of the images that have been circulated on social media, I can confirm that an incident involving one of our officers apparently seen to push a member of the public is currently under review by our Director of Professional Standards, and another incident where a member of the public has seen to assault an officer has led to one arrest of that member of the public.
Prince William's godmother has apologised for repeatedly asking a charity boss where she was from during a royal reception. Buckingham Palace says Lady Susan Hussey met Ngozi Fulani in person to discuss the incident. Lady Susan has pledged to deepen her awareness of the sensitivities involved. Miss Fulani accepted the apology and says she appreciates that there was no malice intended. Russia has launched one of its biggest attacks on Ukraine since the start of the war. 76 missiles were fired during rush hour this morning, with Ukraine shooting down 60 of them. An attack on the country's power grid also forced emergency blackouts nationwide, with the operator saying consumption has dropped by more than 50%. Actor Kevin Spacey has appeared before Westminster Magistrates Court via a video link, charged with 7 new sex offences. Prosecutors say they all relate to the same alleged victim, taking the total number of charges against him to 12. The new charges include 3 counts of indecent assault, 3 of sexual assault, and 1 of causing a person to engage in sexual activity without consent. They allegedly happened between 2001 and 2004. His trial is expected to start in June at the Old Bailey. British retailers recorded a drop in sales last month, despite online discounts and Christmas shopping. The Office for National Statistics says the volume of sales went down 0.4% last month. It follows a rise of 0.9% in October. The ONS says department stores did report an increase in sales, with a longer period of Black Friday offers helping. And the world's largest freestanding cylindrical aquarium has burst in Berlin. The 25-metre-high tank inside the leisure complex was home to around 1,500 exotic fish. 1 million litres of water, along with the fish, spilled out onto nearby streets, and 2 people were injured by flying splinters of glass. Hundreds of hotel guests from within the complex had to be evacuated. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now let's get back to Michelle.
Thanks for that, Bethany. Well, I'm with you right through until 7 o'clock tonight. So alongside me, my panel, we've got Atul Hatwal, is the editor of Labour Uncut, and alongside him, James Woodhausen is a visiting professor at London South Bank University. Good evening, gentlemen. Those pictures, by the way, in that news bulletin of that aquarium, did you see that, crashing down in Germany? Goodness me. They were very lucky, by the way. I think it happened at about, I don't know, 10 to 6 in the morning or whatever. Can you imagine if that was a little bit later when it was a bit busier? Doesn't bear thinking about, does it? Anyway, you can get in touch with me tonight. I want all of your thoughts. You've already started messaging in. You do make me smile, you guys at home, I've got to say. Anyway, the email is gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at gbnews. The pensions one has got a lot of you talking tonight already. Somebody, I can't mention your name, Lee, I will mention your name, but I won't mention the swear word that you use, can't read that out at tea time, but he says, whoever these people are, they are bleeps for even thinking about taxing pensions more. As always, lots of conversation about my outfit. I do like when you comment on my clothes. We're going to have like a whole fashion show, me and you guys. You can start sending me your outfits as well if you're bored, and I'll critique you. Matt says, I look like a giant chessboard today. Thank you very much. Nigel says, Michelle, are you wearing a checkered flag? At the end of the race, he says, well, it is Friday after all. Yes, it is. Victor says, hello, Michelle. After last night's ding-dong on the show, is it safe to come out from behind my sofa? Oh, I know what you mean. Did you watch that show last night? Goodness me, I'm going to bring my boxing gloves next time. I think that might be a quicker way to sort things out, mightn't it? Anyway, give me all your thoughts on the topics today. Pensions, I want to talk about public safety videos. I want to talk about that whole race row, that situation. There's been a meeting taken place and an apology given and accepted and all the rest of it. So I want your thoughts on all of that. But first up, the NHS. I mean, I have to caveat this. I am a lover of the NHS as a principle. Certainly the people that work on the front line, very hard-working people. And I do think it must be very demoralising when people like me and all the rest of it, we have these debates about the state of the NHS. If you're working there, it must get you down a little bit. So I just want to caveat all of this by saying this is not an attack on doctors and nurses, etc. It's the system that I want to critique today, because we all know, don't we, that that system is in quite a bit of a mess. And now the former Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, says basically it needs fundamental reform. We need to have an honest conversation about what that could look like. James, I'll start with you. Root and branch, Sajid Javid is basically saying the system was set up 70 years ago, life's moved on, and it's time for the NHS to look different. Is it?
I think so. And I noticed that Wes Streeting said pretty much the same thing just a few days back. We can't go on in the old way. For me, it isn't just a question of budgets and stuff like that, and the money, the good money that's been sent after bad. It is, for me, very much a question of low pay and overwork at the bottom and outstanding bureaucracy and incompetence at the top. And I put it to you that the least we could do is have a review, possibly the abolition of healthcare trusts, local ones. They have brought us to this pretty pass. My encounters with them have not been pretty at all. I think they are self-satisfied, overpaid, incompetent, and generally are not near the front line of where the action needs to happen. So when we're talking about root and branch review, abolish the healthcare trust, because anything would be better than their current management of the system.
Atul, do you agree with any of that?
No system is perfect, and I certainly think accountability can be improved in the NHS. But here are two basic facts. In 2010, when the last Labour government left office, satisfaction with the NHS on the current model was at 70%, the highest on record. Satisfaction with the NHS right now, the same model, is at 36%. What has changed? And what has changed is funding. There are 133,000 vacancies unmet in the NHS. There are 165,000 vacancies unmet in social care. The priority, and there is a place for a discussion on reform, but the priority...
When you say unmet, what do you mean? Vacant or...
Unfilled.
Right.
The priority is to fund and staff the NHS properly. Actually, the latter, more than just spraying money around, the latter is the key. 30,000 operations last year were cancelled because there weren't enough staff. Before any discussion about reform, fix the immediate, because this model was working not so long ago, and now it's broke, and the one thing that's changed is money.
Well, I would actually push back on that and say that the one thing that's changed, because you say it was 70% satisfaction rate or whatever, but if you go back to before the pandemic, it was about 60. I'm not saying that that's perfect, but it's certainly not as low as 36 now. And for me, the thing that you're saying the thing that's changed is money. I would say the thing that's changed is that you've had this ridiculous scenario of the NHS becoming an NCS, a National COVID Service. That's all anyone cared about. Everything else was pushed to the back burner, and now you're seeing it all stacking up. So I would argue that it's not necessarily a funding thing. It was a forgetting everything else, basically, focusing on one thing that's brought so many problems to the fore. And what I'm interested in is the NHS, you're saying more money, but more money to do what? Keep it in its current form? Do what we always do?
When I worked for the Labour Party in the 90s, we had a phrase that we would brief our people to go out on the media with, and it's actually not just a phrase, it's completely correct. Standards, not structures. We can waste a lot of time talking about abstract models and kind of reorganising things like Andrew Lansley did for the Tories a decade ago. Focus on standards. The start of accountability is making sure standards are enforced and the patients are listened to. Now, that doesn't require root and branch reform. It requires making the structures and processes that are there work. But at the driver for all of that is proper staffing.
James is shaking his head.
Well, it's all very technocratic, Atul. I mean, I already said that nurses, junior doctors, the frontline staff are not paid properly. You've got these shocking vacancy rates, absolutely. And therefore, it's not just toying with structures to say, abolish the healthcare trust, which have a democratic deficit, which you seem to concede to. It also means paying the right people the right amount of money and getting rid of the wrong people. And we also have to ask some serious questions about the doctors working from home, doctors not doing a full day's working week, all the Royal College of Practitioners and surgeons and all the other royal institutions. We have to ask about Matthew Taylor and his Confederation of Health Service people. Are they really listening on the ground to the sort of problems that we are getting with ambulances and so on? You can't, it's not a debate, you can't divorce the questions of structure and reform from the bad lot facing NHS employees.
All of those debates can be had, but compare ourselves to France or Germany, we spend 25 to 40% less per capita. In places like Germany, you can see a GP the next day. You could go on Saturday and you could see a GP. You don't have to make an appointment. You can turn up at 8 a.m. and within half an hour, you'll see a GP. This is, we can talk about structures, we can talk about models, but fix the immediate, fill the vacancies.
Then you're denying the possibility of reform.
Because once we have a stable system, only then can you judge what is systemic and what is funding.
How are you going to fill the vacancies?
More money.
There's a combination. There's a combination in the short. There's more funding, but also in the short term, there's prospectively looking at recruitment from abroad. Any which way, I think in government they will have a bazillion options on this, but just that is the priority, and everything else is a distraction.
See, there's a job ad. You might have seen this. There's a job ad circulating, doing the rounds over the last couple of days. A director of lived experience. I'm not making this up, I promise. This is at the Midlands Partnership NHS Foundation. It's a full-time job. They want an interpersonally talented and strategic bridge builder.
That's
to
you,
join.
asshole.
Yeah, well, I want it to be me, quite frankly, because they're paying 115 grand a year for this director of lived experience. So my problem with some of this, everyone who watches this will know my mum and sister are NHS nurses, so I don't disagree in terms of let's pay these people more. I don't have a problem with that. But I do have this kind of problem of the fundamental answer to things just seems to be chuck more money at the NHS, because to me, you're getting a bucket that's filled with holes and you're just chucking more money into it. It's just going to come out the bottom. It's broken, the NHS, lots of it.
So this has been done before when there was an NHS on its knees in the mid-90s and it was brought back. There were new hospitals, enough doctors, enough nurses, improved care, shorter stays in hospital, quick access to GPs. All of that was achieved under the last Labour government. So money on its own isn't sufficient, I agree. It has to be managed correctly. There has to be accountability. And yes, there doesn't have to be a director necessarily of lived experience, but there do need to be doctors, there do need to be nurses. There are tens of thousands of these roles that are vacant.
But
That's what's required.
It's not just the sort of woke jobs that we've got to look out for, which you're quite right about, Michelle, and what the Conservative right wants to look out for. It's the bureaucratic jobs, the reorganisers, the consultants, the economic planners, and all of the people who are making it their business to obscure what is going on, which is a deteriorating service which is well past its sell-by.
I fundamentally disagree on this point, which is a lot is blamed on bureaucrats and managers. Actually, the problem in the NHS and the way we get the most value out of our clinicians is more effective management. And in some cases, not all, not in the sort of, some of the kind of culture change type jobs, but in some cases it means better and more managers, actually, because we're going to, in the same way as school, you can have fabulous teachers, but a bad manager at
But we've got more managers than we've ever had in the NHS. Every week there's another report about thousands being recruited. And as I say, they're not just in the funny
And in
jobs.
terms of spend, when you look at comparisons with the private sector of managers to the amount of money, I mean, it's hundreds of, over £100 billion. It's actually undermanaged when you look at it, if you do a comparison with the private sector and indeed other systems around the world.
Well, we can all agree it's undermanaged. The question is whether it's overstaffed in management and whether they're doing an effective job. I'm telling you they're not. And I think that's what the popular experience is, if you do talk about lived experience.
Maybe that's what the
it's
director
that
of
of
lived
bureaucratic mismanagement, poor management of appointments and all the rest of it. Confusions with prescriptions. It's chaos down there, and the IT reflects that, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, IT is a whole different conversation as well, isn't it? The NHS has got a woeful track record of deploying new IT projects. Just as you guys was talking, I was just jotting down some ideas. One of the first things I would do is get a blank sheet of paper and say, what is the scope of the NHS? I would start on that basic principle. What should be in scope for the NHS? What should be out of scope for the NHS? Because it seems to me like pretty much any ailment, even cosmetic things, are now getting done on the NHS. So I'd start looking at that. I'd look at why do you have 6 months full pay on sickness, so you can be off for half a year on full pay. I would be looking at things like that. I'd be looking at charging for missed appointments as well. So many people just waste the appointments that we're saying you can't get a hold of. And what about education as well? If you pay to go to university and to become a nurse or whatever, what about doing some things like writing off the student debt if they stay at the NHS for a period of time? I don't know, that's just my back of a fag packet ideas. You tell me yours. I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, I'll have some of your reactions to that story, and also pensions. I chuckle, only because I know that some of you will be shouting at your screen already on this one. Do you reckon, for example, if your spouse passes away and then obviously you become entitled to their pension, that pension should be subject to inheritance tax? Do you? Tell me your thoughts and I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs and Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, right through until 7 o'clock this evening. Alongside me, Atul Hatwell is the editor of Labour Uncut and a former advisor to the Blair government, and James Woodhousen is a visiting professor at London South Bank University. Welcome back, everybody. Joe's written in and said, hello, Michelle, I'm Joe, and I have autism. I watch GB News every day, especially your show, and you want to say you think we do a brilliant job. Thank you very much, Joe. We appreciate that. Rebecca says, Michelle, you say your viewers make you smile. I can't make you smile because none of my emails are ever read out. I would love to know why. I don't know, Rebecca. I've just found that one, though, so I've read that one out, so at least that's one, eh? Neil says, Sajid Javid for once is right. The NHS 70 years ago was a good concept, but it was never going to keep up with evolution. Brian says there's nothing wrong with the original model of the NHS. He says it's the fact that people are overusing it and abusing it. That, he says, is the problem in all of this. Richard says, when Matron had the reins of hospitals when I was a kid, the NHS ran like a Swiss watch for a fraction of the cost. Then he says, government decided to employ managers on 6-figure salaries, and he puts the downfall down to that. Let me know your thoughts. Margaret, by the way, says, James, you hit it all on the head. If you get rid of most of the managers, they waste the money. And they cost too much. Are you an NHS manager, by the way? Are you watching this, screaming at the telly that you can't get rid of you guys? If so, get in touch and tell me, please. Let's move on and talk about pensions, shall we? One of the country's leading economic think tanks says that pensions should be subject to inheritance tax. The Institute for Fiscal Studies basically says that the remainder of a pension pot could be put into your estate once you die, basically meaning that they will get to take yet another tranche of tax off it. Atul, what do you think to this one?
I think I'll understand a lot of your viewers' worry and anger. No one wants to pay more tax, but look at the situation we're in. We've got a huge pile of debt. We've just been talking about an NHS that is woefully underfunded. You can't see a GP. There's not enough police on the streets. All of that costs money, and the money's got to come from somewhere. And the only places it will come from are either schemes like this, which, in fairness, would equalise the treatment of pension pots with the rest of an estate, or higher income tax, which everyone pays. And I think it's going to come from lots of different places. So I think there's merit in this scheme. It would increase revenue by about a quarter of the current yield of inheritance tax. It should be considered. I don't profess to have a full impact analysis of it, but it's the sort of thing that should be considered because more money has to be raised from different sources. And there's no getting around that if we want to have enough police, doctors, nurses, teachers in our public services.
James?
Well, I'm sorry that you don't have a full impact analysis.
Yeah, get off.
You know, everybody comes equipped with one of those. But I think the most striking thing for me about this is who or what is the IFS? Can you name their chief? of the Institute for Fiscal Studies, Michelle?
No, I cannot. But I can tell you what the acronym stands for, which is, as you said, Institute of Fiscal Studies. And apparently it's a very well-respected think tank, James.
Well, you know, that's about as convincing as saying I'm well-respected. You know,
Oh,
it's
hang on, I
just,
can't tell you the chief exec now because they've just told me it in my ear, but I think that'll be cheating, so I won't.
It's Paul Johnson.
Yeah.
And, you know, the question we've got to ask is, who are all these people? You know, you've got the IMF, the OBR, the MMC of the BOE, you've got the PRA, you've got the FCA.
Right,
and
so you don't like think tanks, right? So
well, no, they're not think tanks. They're government regulators and government quangos and independent, revered institutions like the Institute for Fiscal Studies. And the reason you can't name Paul Johnson is you never got to vote for him. Now, he is saying that by raising the princely sum, I believe from what I've read, £1.9 billion, which is kind of a few Saudi homes in central London, that he is saying, and you are intimating, Atul, that can solve, you know, the big financial problems that we've had. Well, look, you know, the point is, elected governments are supposed to make these decisions. Of course, the IFS has every right to express its opinion, but for us to go to the altar of all of these three-lettered acronyms and believe that that is the way to run economic policy.
Well, no, because the government, that's a
country.
recommendation, isn't it, from someone that's paid to do what they're doing, which is come up with economic thoughts, principles and strategies. It's on the government to review that and choose whether or not
Yes, but once they're paid to do what they're doing, they're no longer independent. They are just a sort of cipher, a media force for pressing the government to do the right technocratic thing. It's undemocratic. We are not able to re-elect these people. We cannot vote for them, and they have far too much influence.
Think tanks think, advisors advise, politicians decide. Our democratically elected politicians are the only ones who make that choice. It's a valid proposal in the context of a fiscal situation where we are billions and billions and billions south of where we need to be. It's not the full solution. But if there are 10 ideas like this, kind of that go across different government spending, which raise 20 billion, 30 billion, suddenly we are in the realms of we kind of see a route out of the mire.
No, because this is what you're saying is we need more jobs for the enlightened economists who all sit on the same boards. If you look actually at the board of the Institute for Fiscal Studies, which I did today, you'll find the same old people from the same old acronyms that I've already mentioned. It's a nice boys' club. There's a few women there, and they are a complete substitute for a chancellor who knows how to run the economy.
They are a technocratic think tank, but in the same way that Liz Truss brought in lots of people from the Institute of Economic Affairs, listened to what the Institute of Economic Affairs was saying, and then crashed the economy. The Institute of Economic Affairs has a perfect right to make its case. I don't agree with it. It's a perfect right to make its case. It's if a politician then decides to act on it and take us off the edge of a cliff, that's problematic. If a government, whether it's Conservative or Labour, listens to the IFS and takes us off a cliff, then actually the IFS should get some blowback, but it's the politicians who are at fault, and they're the ones who need to be accountable.
Indeed. What do you think to all these kind of quangos and all these think tanks and all the rest of it? Are you more on James's camp, a little bit suspicious, not happy with it all? Let me know. I personally, when it comes to inheritance tax, by the way, I don't agree with that as a principle at all. When you look at inheritance tax, why should you be double taxed? So whoever it is that's created this pension pot, you know, they will have paid tax on their earnings, their incomes. I don't know, if someone's bought some assets, that'll probably be bought with pre-taxed money. So you're buying this out of your net proceeds. So why should you then be subject to even more tax when you die? So personally, never mind extending inheritance tax to yet another component, I'd do away with it altogether. So I would. I have to say, many of you guys at home are not into the concept of having pensions further taxed. Yeah, John, you're a sensible guy. You agree with me. You don't agree with inheritance tax either. Graham says the suggestion that your partner should pay tax after your death is obscene. We've paid tax all our lives, Graham. See, you're on the same camp as me. Why should we pay more? Eric says, here we go, hitting pensioners yet again. One of these days we'll go on strike and refuse to die, says Eric. Alison says, my mum always said there was two guarantees in life, tax and death. Clearly, she says, there are three: tax, death tax. There you go. Well, around and around and around you go. Keep your thoughts coming in. What do you make to that? Going to take a quick break. When I come back, we're all familiar by now, aren't we, of the tragic deaths of those little boys over in the lake in Solihull. It's got people saying that perhaps we need a return to the public safety videos from yesteryear. Do you remember those? They were intended, of course, to warn people, young people in particularly, about potential dangers. Is it time to return to them? Give me your thoughts. I'll see you in 2.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs and Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store? You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs and Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. Right through until 7 o'clock this evening, Atul Hatwell is the editor of Labour Uncut and a former advisor to the Blair government. And James Woodhousen is visiting professor at London South Bank University. You guys are sending in your messages on your droves. The first topic I covered was the NHS. Fred says the following: Michelle, why does nobody ever mention the PFI initiative that has proved costly, initiated by Labour? Well, that is a very good question. I wasn't going to go back to the NHS, but very briefly, well, do you want to answer that question?
PFI initiatives were responsible for the wholesale rebuilding of our hospital infrastructure. We probably need to do a lot more now, but all those new hospitals were financed partially through, PFI played a big role in that. And I don't think anyone on the Labour side would make any apology for rebuilding hospitals, refurbishing wards, and a lot more than was kind of, big promises from Boris Johnson about 40 new hospitals. Actually, Labour built and refurbished.
But did you do it under the right structure? I think Fred's asking.
I think the Chancellor at the time, Gordon Brown, made those choices.
Yeah, but
you could argue
that
it could have been. You could argue actually that it should have been funded entirely through government spending.
Well, that's just the point, because what they did was they outsourced it, as usual, like policy and practice in general, to a lot of lone people, construction companies, trusts, and nearly everybody else. And the result is that these hospitals are saddled with debt for years and years to come. The structures that you refer to, Michelle, are exactly the point that you are avoiding.
Well, there you go. I'm not going to get too deep into that, but Fred, you said, why didn't anyone raise it? People bring this topic up often, actually, so I thought to myself, you know what, Fred? Just for you, my friend, I'll raise it. Consider it raised. Tell me what you think to the answer. For now, I'm going to move on. We're all familiar, though, aren't we, with the terrible situation, those deaths of the 4 little boys who fell through that lake in Solihull. God, it makes me go goosepimply, so it does, just talking and thinking about it. It's got a lot of people talking, of course. It's so dangerous, isn't it, to be on ice like that? And many people are saying that back in the day, I don't know if you remember some of them, there was those videos that were quite shocking, actually, watching them as a kid. And they were all about warning you about things like falling into water or getting electrocuted or whatever. We're playing one as we speak, actually, about the electricity pylons. I'm massively distracted by looking at the state of some of those mullets on screen, I've got to be honest. But James Woodhousen, what do you think? Is it time for a return to kind of public safety videos aimed at children?
I don't think so. I mean, you know, go right ahead and spend 20 million if you must. But the question is, are children watching this stuff? Do they take it in? Do they believe it? Or do what we rather need is a GPS map of every pond in the country and some proper signage near those ponds warning people about the dangers that happen with icing over at Christmas. That signage in this country is very, very poor, whether it's safety or directional.
But people don't read signs. I've lost count. I go to the ponds with my kid and everyone feeds the ducks. And there are about 10 signs that say, do not feed the ducks.
Well, ducks is a little different from a drowning.
No, I'm talking about a sign.
Yeah, I know. But the thing is that another video is, you know, a Band-Aid solution for a deeper problem. The other thing that needs to be done, on top of signs, not the only thing, is to get to schools about it and to get to the kids about it and, you know, really explain to them why too much safety isn't a great idea, but on this occasion, it's very wise and people have died. It's a shocking incident. Certainly.
It is. It's really shocking, very upsetting. Brett says, Michelle, I can remember the Green Cross Code Man, stop, look and listen. He says, but these days, that advert would be saying, walk straight out, your music in your ears, nice and loud. It would all be very different. Anyway, Atul, what do you remember those videos?
I do remember them. I grew up in the 70s. I remember actually a very, very high kind of injury count for the kids in those videos. I think it would be a great idea. Updated, though, they have to be striking like they were. I mean, back in the 70s, there wasn't much to look at in the 80s as well. There wasn't much to watch on TV, so you watched it, whatever was served out. But in the world of social, in the world of online, there's ways to have that go viral. There's great creatives that can make this striking and drive sharing and engagement amongst kids. And to be honest, if anything helps avert what happened, even if it's 5 million, 10 million quid on a campaign, do it.
Yeah, I'm showing my age now. I am having flashbacks to being at school assembly, and they used to wheel this telly in this wooden cabinet. They used to wheel it in, and then used to open the doors, and we used to have to watch these things. Some people, though, the flip side of the argument would be, why is it the government's job to parent the children? That's what some people will say. Why is it the job of the government to warn children of dangers?
Part of the job of the government is to make sure to make sure people have the information they need and to create an environment where you understand, you know, the basics of kind of living in society. Most parents will kind of tell their kids off for doing things that they shouldn't do, but sometimes they don't. And actually, if a campaign which will cost per capita like a few pennies per person helps avert this, if it sends a message that's striking enough and resonant enough for young people to engage with, then great. Because, you know, in the 70s and the early 80s, that scared the living hell out of me. Some of those.
Remembered it to this day. That's worth it then, isn't it? A few pennies to try and keep.
Well, it might be. You know, it's not a matter of principle, but I think the people who've been saying to you that parental responsibility is important, you know, that's absolutely right. You know, fathers and mothers have a duty to bring up kids, to take risks, to graze their knees, but not to keel over in the middle of a freezing pond and die. And that can't all be the government's responsibility. And, you know, I think you're right, Atul, there. You know, is it going to be TikTok? Is it going to be social media? Is it going to be the BBC? You know, these are questions that don't really invite the kind of sensible and considered cultural campaign in schools, in families and elsewhere and around ponds where, you know, we can avoid these very unnecessary and hurtful deaths.
Peter has emailed in saying this should all be taught in schools. You could take the time that you spend teaching all of this kind of a boy can be a girl and all this kind of... You could take that time, Peter says, and use that time to teach the kids about safety. That's not a bad idea, that, Peter, I've got to be honest. Speaking of signs, by the way, you've planted a seed in my head now. I remember the signs at swimming pools that was all about no heavy petting. Remember those signs in a public swimming pool?
Bring them back, I say.
Yeah, I don't know if it was just a whole thing or what. I don't know. I just remember signs.
What went on? What
well,
went
that's
on?
What I'm wondering.
What did it mean?
What on earth was whole folk doing in the public swimming pools that warranted signs saying no heavy petting? I dread to think. Anyway, I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about the Royal Race Route. I've made myself laugh. Sorry about the swimming pools. I apologise. Anyway, and yeah, you know the race route by now anyway, don't you? There's been a meeting now between the two parties and apologies being issued. It's been accepted, apparently. Is that the end of it? We'll be discussing in 2 minutes.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs and Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight alongside me. Atul Hatwal is the editor of Labour Uncut and a former advisor to the Blair government. And also James Woodhousen is visiting professor at London South Bank University. I was just pondering heavy petting signs in swimming pools. James, never heard of them. So it might just be a whole thing or a northern thing. I don't think so. Phil says, well, Michelle, that was obvious. They didn't want, in the swimming pools, they didn't want the water to be polluted. I would say, Phil, I can just imagine how much wee there was in those swimming pools. I suspect that they were polluted a long time before any heavy petting had occurred. Anyway, let's move on, shall we? Should we talk about... stop it, James. James is making me laugh. Right, so let's move on and be sensible. Buckingham Palace says the lady that's accused the senior aide to the late Queen of repeatedly questioning her about her background has received a personal apology. Ngozi Fulani met, of course, we know this, don't we, Prince William's godmum, Lady Susan Hussey. Apparently there was an apology. She now accepts that there was no malice intended by the comments, and everybody basically wants to move on. Is that right? Is it time just to move on?
I think so. All's well that ends well. The issue in the first instance wasn't asking about Ngozi Fulani's background. That's a legitimate question. It's not taking the answer that she gave.
At face value.
Yeah, and kind of pressing. And equally, that's not, as this statement shows, necessarily a function of deep racism. It's just a bit of clumsiness, a bit maybe old-fashioned attitudes. And this is the right place for that whole episode to land. Both women have spoken. it's clear that despite some of the abuse that Ngozi Fulani got, that there's nothing there that refutes her account. And for Lady Hussey, there's nothing there that says that she had any malicious intent. And it's a really good resolution to a bit of an unfortunate and sort of fractious event.
But why did it need to get to this then? If someone had asked her this at the Palace Do, why not just explain then, actually, I think your questioning is a little bit inappropriate. You have that conversation then, Lady Hussey says, oh, God, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean it like that. You shake hands, you do cheers, we drink, you move on.
I think that's probably right. But equally, if you're meeting, I don't know Ngozi Fulani's background particularly, but if you're meeting someone from the royal court, someone who's been the Queen's senior lady-in-waiting, it can be quite an intimidating experience. And when someone comes up to you, lifts your lifts your badge and presses you, actually your natural reaction is just to answer and not to push back and not to have the row and not to say, no, I don't think that's appropriate. And you feel afterwards, and I think lots of your viewers will empathise with this aspect of it, when you're speaking to someone really important or really senior and you don't necessarily give a great account of yourself, you feel afterwards a bit kind of low and you want to kind of correct things. And I think she was, that's what she did when she put it out on social.
Yeah, I have to say, I don't really get what you're saying, because if you felt low and you felt uncomfortable, why wouldn't you just contact the event organiser and discuss it with them? Why go to the broader public? That's the bit I don't get. James, let me bring you in.
Well, there's a moment in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy with Alec Guinness where he says, coincidence is always suspicious. And I think there's quite a lot in that. I don't want to make any unseemly charges, but it's quite a press feat that was pulled off here, where you have a tape recording of irreformable until today's event.
We have a transcript, don't we?
A transcript, all right, wherever that came from, of a supposedly irreformable, lady-in-waiting at just the moment when Harry and Meghan are conducting their assault on the royal family. Now, I'm a Republican. I want the whole lot abolished. It takes something for me to get sympathetic towards a lady-in-waiting.
Smacks of conspiracies.
Can I finish my point before you make your clever remark?
Go on then. He says it's conspiracy, but what you're about to say.
The thing is, the most striking feature of this whole episode is that the royal household say that they will continue to focus on inclusion and diversity after this whole episode. What a travesty for the royal family to rally the nation around those two woke, bankrupt, old-fashioned Democratic Party boring nouns, when they need to rally the nation, if anything, towards what are we going to do about our future? What are we going to do about the NHS? What kind of Britain do we want in future? And that is the thing that they want to avoid by this boring chit-chat about inclusion and diversity. I'm glad the two have made it up, but I can't take on face value the claims made by Ngozi Fulani. Even her name, if you do the research, is fairly worth researching.
There's two things here. One, when you're dealing with something as established and prestigious and regal as the royal court, sending a letter, what do you think is going to happen? It's like if you send a letter to your local NHS trust, nothing happens, let alone if you send it to the royal family. So I think she's completely justified in putting something out on social. It
wasn't putting something out. It was a completely orchestrated Oprah Winfrey, full-on, 24/7 campaign to try to reform the royalty.
The idea that there is a global conspiracy against the royal family is, I just think, that's just for the birds. She put some stuff out. Netflix had already scheduled when their stuff was coming out. From the statement, there's no suggestion at all from Lady Hussey that this was somehow entrapment or a setup. And just one more point on her name. Her name's she was born Marlene Headey. Lots of people of Caribbean descent make the choice that actually they don't want that name because it was the slave owner's name. In the same way that Cassius Clay changed his name to Muhammad Ali. Others make different choices, but I think it's absolutely fair and right to respect that choice.
Yeah, but no one's not respecting that choice. But at the end of the day, if you choose to change your name into a name that sounds perhaps African, you choose to go to an event dressed in a way where you're absolutely justifiably celebrating your heritage. So you're dressed, you know, in your beautiful traditional garb. You've got
Except
your
it's
head
not
wearing.
Caribbean.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is if you're dressed in a way that sets you out as different to some of the other attendees, and then you get picked up for that point of difference. Your point of difference, the statement that you were trying to make in your presentation, is now accepted, and it's now picked intrigue. So someone then goes over to you and asks, "Oh, where are you from?"
So I think
Sister Space. No, where are you from? Hackney. No, where are you really from? I mean, come on. If you present yourself as a remark of respect and a nod to celebrate your heritage, then why would you be offended and insulted when one seeks to determine your heritage?
There is nothing offensive about the initial question. The point of offence is not taking at face value Ngozi Fulani's answer. And I think the reason she's chosen the name Fulani is that I think that's the part of Nigeria where originally she would see herself as coming from. But it's the not taking at face value and pushing and pushing and pushing. And in fairness to Lady Hussey, she probably didn't think she was being terribly offensive.
What you're advocating
No, let me finish, James. But for many people, and I've had this, and you know, other people from minority communities will have had this, others may not mind it. But I've had that, and it's the not taking my response that's the offensive bit.
Well, was she rude? Yeah, she was rude. But, you know, what you're proposing, Atul, is a whole multiplication of the speech codes, the avoidance of microaggressions, the preservation of a safe space.
It's just common sense.
You know, you Blairites like etiquette. You like to control the way people speak. You don't want people to level with them and say, where are you from?
I think just common sense and a bit of empathy with people's feelings.
Can I just ask, by the way, some of you might have noticed, somebody on social media has taken a great deal of time to prepare basically a set of allegations, claims or whatever into Sister Space as a charity and asked that the Charity Commission does an investigation, which it's now doing. So, of course, these are just allegations, nothing's been proven, whatever, it's an investigation. Some people are saying that because Lady Hussey has now accepted the apology of Ngozi Fulani, that this investigation into Sister Space should be dropped.
No, not at all. They're completely separate things. I've read those allegations. They're very serious and they're very concerning. And actually, they should be fully investigated. And if they're true, then action absolutely must be taken because the allegations certainly, describe a grift. But the interaction with Lady Hussey is a completely separate event.
Well, yeah, and if you haven't seen some of these allegations, by the way, I strongly advise that you take some time. You need to sit down and pull up a chair and get a cuppa, because it's quite long, I'll be honest with you, but it's absolutely fascinating. So I would spend some time looking at that if I were you. Right, I want some of your thoughts on that topic. Where are you on this one? Do you think that it's time now to forget it all, move on, and it's nice and happy that everyone's moved on? Part of the statement, by the way, that I found fascinating from the Palace is that Miss Fulani and Lazy Susan asked that they be left in peace to rebuild their lives in the wake of an immensely distressing period for them both. Well, I don't mean to be rude or anything, right? But why do we become so extreme in our language? Like, when you follow this whole story...
It was deeply traumatic.
Initially, yeah, it was deeply traumatic. I was violated. And now I need to rebuild my life in the wake of an immensely distressing period.
Like a war, really.
But maybe it's just an overactive PR who's written those words. And actually, the two ladies had a nice chat and moved on.
Anyway, let me know your thoughts. I have to say, on the pension one, no one's in favour pretty much of the extra tax. Paul, on the advertising, the messages for the kids, yes, bring back all of this advertising. The dangers is a beneficial thing. Get the message out there. Elizabeth completely agrees as well. When it comes to the royal situation, many people are saying... Why? Sorry, a fly just landed right on my face. I think that was my fly's hint for me to shut up and throw over to Lawrence Fox. Atul, James, thank you very much for your time. Lawrence Fox is up next. I'm going to take the hint of the fly and hand over to Lawrence Fox. Lawrence, good evening. What have you got for us?
Hi, Dewbs. Great show. Tonight we're talking about strikes, school indoctrination and health tips from Annabelle Croft for the new year to make people like me feel better.
Oh, I'll tell you what, the amount of overindulging, I'm going to eat too much, I'm going to drink too much over the Christmas period. I confess that now, so I'll be tuning in for those health tips. Lawrence, it sounds good. Thanks again to my guys here. Thanks you at home for your company. Up next, everyone, the weather. Have a good weekend.
Good evening, I'm Alex Deakin and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. The weekend promises big changes. It is going to steadily be turning milder, and as it does so, some wet weather on Sunday could lead to a spell of snow for a time. That's going to come from low pressure systems lurking behind me way out in the Atlantic. For the time being, we've got high pressure across the south, making for another very frosty night. Further north, it is turning a bit milder, but still cold enough for some problems as we continue to see some hill snow and at low levels, rain and sleet showers, potentially turning things quite icy from North Wales across northwest England and into parts of Scotland. For much of the south, as I said, it is very cold again. In rural spots, negative double figures, and similar temperatures across northeast Scotland, perhaps where there's some snow lying on the ground. So potentially icy on Saturday morning. We've still got these showers coming in. Quite a lot of cloud tomorrow compared to today across northwest England and North Wales. Rain at low levels, but some hill snow will continue. Certainly snow in the showers across the highlands of Scotland. For many, though, it's a dry and a bright Saturday. Still cold, but not quite as cold. Temperatures are just starting to lift as the winds switch round to a southwesterly. That means we'll see a few more showers across North Wales, northern England during Saturday evening, still with some snow on the hills and therefore potentially icy. There will be another widespread frost on Saturday evening, but actually temperatures rising through the night as we start to see this change. Wet weather just edging into the southwest means that, yes, it'll be frosty through the evening, but temperatures will be picking up through the night. As this wet weather arrives, though, and hits the cold air, there could be some heavy snow for a time on Sunday. Wales, particularly the high ground, then into parts of the Midlands, and then into northern England and Scotland. That snow could cause some problems, but even further south, the rain hitting frozen surfaces may make things very icy. So we do have warnings in place. Still cold across the northeast, but it is turning milder through Sunday.